I never expected her to remember my name. Not really. People say your name all the time, baristas, delivery drivers, professors reading off attendance lists, but it usually slides right off them. Like they're saying it for the sake of the moment. Not because it means anything. But she remembered. The first time she said it, I actually looked behind me. Waka's, right? I turned around slowly. She was standing near the kitchen counter in her house, wiping her hands on a pale blue dish towel, like she'd just finished something small and ordinary. For a second, I thought maybe my friend had told her. That would have made sense. I'd come over to study with him plenty of times. Still, the way she said it felt different. Like she'd been holding the name in her mouth for a while. Yeah, I said. That's me. She smiled, not the big polite kind adults usually give their kids friends. Just a quiet one. The kind that barely moved her lips. Tea or coffee. That was how most evenings started. My friend's house had this routine feel to it. Same hallway light, always on. Same faint smell of detergent from the laundry room. His mom moving around the kitchen like she already knew where everything would end up before she even picked it up. I started showing up earlier than him sometimes. Not intentionally. At least that's what I told myself. The first few times, he'd still be out somewhere, gym, football practice, whatever, and she'd open the door instead. Oh, she'd say, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. He's not back yet. I nod like that solved something. Do you want to wait? And somehow I always did. Most evenings we barely talked. The TV murmuring from the living room, the ticking wall clock above the fridge, the quiet clink of a spoon against a cup. Ordinary sounds. She'd ask small questions sometimes. How's university going? It's okay. You still studying business? Yeah, nothing deep, nothing worth remembering. But she remembered things anyway. One night she slid a mug across the table toward me. No sugar, she said. I stared at it. You remembered. She shrugged lightly. You always push the sugar bowl away. I hadn't even realized I did that. I noticed little things about her too. The way she tucked her sleeves up when washing dishes. The faint line between her brows when she was thinking about something. The way her bracelets clicked softly whenever she reached for something on the table. Once while we were both sitting at the kitchen island, she caught me looking, not her face, at her hands. Long fingers, pale nail polish. A thin silver ring she kept twisting around her finger when she was distracted. I looked away quickly. She didn't say anything, but the corner of her mouth lifted slightly, like she'd noticed. Most nights I left before my friend and I even finished studying. I had this habit of checking my phone while walking home, scrolling through conversations that had already ended. Unsent messages, half-written replies. People drifting out of my life in quiet ways. It's strange how loneliness works. It doesn't shout. It just sits there in the background while you do normal things. Drink tea. Scroll your phone. Sit in someone else's kitchen while their mother dries the same plate twice because she forgot she'd already done it. One evening, as I stood by the door, putting my shoes back on, she walked over holding something small. Wait, she said softly. I paused. She reached out and brushed something from my shoulder. Just a tiny piece of lint from my hoodie. Her fingers lingered there a second longer than they probably needed to. Not long enough to mean anything, but long enough that I forgot how to breathe for a moment. She stepped back like nothing had happened. Drive safe, she said. I nodded, suddenly aware of the space between us. That night, when I got home, my phone buzzed on the desk beside me. A new message. Unknown number. I opened it slowly. It was just one line. You left your jacket here tonight. If you want, you can come pick it up tomorrow. Aisha, my friend's mom. I stared at the message for a long time, because I was almost certain I hadn't left any jacket behind. The next afternoon, I stood outside their front gate longer than I should have. Not because I was busy, just thinking. Her message was still open on my phone. You left your jacket here tonight. I checked my room twice before leaving. Closet, chair, the back of my desk chair where I usually threw things. All my jackets were there. So either she was mistaken, or she wanted a reason for me to come back. That thought sat quietly in my chest the whole walk over. When I rang the bell, it took a few seconds before the door opened. It was her. She looked like she'd just come back from somewhere. Hair slightly wind-tousled, a loose sweater falling off one shoulder. Not dressed up, just comfortable. Oh, she said softly when she saw me. You came. I nodded. suddenly aware of how awkward that sounded. Yeah, my jacket. She stepped aside. Gomein. The house felt quieter than usual. No music from my friend's room. No TV murmuring in the background. He's at practice, she said, already walking toward the kitchen. Won't be back for a while. I followed, trying not to read too much into that sentence. The kitchen window was open. A light breeze moved the curtains slightly, bringing in the smell of rain from somewhere far off. She placed 2 cups on the counter. There, you already know the answer, I said. A small smile. No sugar. I leaned against the counter while she poured the tea. For a moment we didn't talk. Just the quiet sound of liquid filling the cups. You didn't actually leave a jacket, did you? I asked finally. She paused, just for a second. Then she set the kettle down. No, she admitted. The honesty caught me off guard. So, why? I thought you might not come otherwise. The room went still after that. She slid the tea toward me. I hope it's not strange. I picked up the cup mostly to give my hand something to do. It's a little strange. Her eyes dropped to the counter. I don't get many visitors anymore. Something about the way she said it felt heavier than the words themselves. I glanced around the kitchen. You have your son? Yes, she said gently. But that's different. She twisted that thin silver ring on her finger again. I'd noticed that before. She did it when she was thinking about something she wasn't sure she should say. My husband moved out 2 years ago, she added quietly. I didn't know that. Sorry, I said. She shrugged lightly. Life happens. But her eyes stayed on the counter a little longer than necessary. We drank our tea in silence for a minute. Not uncomfortable silence. Just careful. You must think it's strange, she said after a while. Me asking you to come back like that. I looked at her. I didn't think it was strange. She raised an eyebrow. No, I just thought maybe you were lonely. The words slipped out before I could stop them. For a moment, I worried I'd crossed some invisible line. But instead of looking offended, she laughed softly. Observant. I shrugged. Sometimes. Her gaze stayed on me a little longer than usual. Not intense, just curious, like she was trying to figure out something about me. You seem lonely too, she said. I looked down at my tea. I guess everyone is a little. Another quiet pause settled between us. Then she stood and reached for a dish towel. I was about to move a box from the hallway closet earlier, she said. But it's heavier than it looks. I followed her out to the hallway. The closet door was open, and a cardboard box sat half pulled from the shelf. Here, I said, lifting it easily. Careful, she murmured, stepping closer to guide where it should go. When I turned to set it down on the floor, she was right there, closer than I expected. Our hands brushed for just a second as she steadied the box. She didn't pull away immediately, just looked up at me with that same quiet expression, almost like she was noticing something she hadn't before. Then she smiled softly and said, "Thank you." I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. After that afternoon, something shifted. Not in a dramatic way. Nothing obvious. Just small things. When I came over now, she noticed faster. Sometimes before I even knocked. The door would open and she'd already be standing there, like she'd heard my footsteps on the path. Hi, she'd say. Simple. Soft. And somehow that word stayed with me longer than it should have. A few days later, my friend and I were sitting in the living room pretending to study. He had headphones around his neck and was scrolling through his phone. You've been coming here a lot lately, he said casually. I looked up from my notebook. I always come here. Yep, he shrugged, but like earlier, I felt something tighten in my chest. I like studying here. MHM. He didn't sound convinced. From the kitchen, I heard the quiet clink of a spoon against a mug. She was making tea again. A minute later, she appeared in the doorway. Tea? She asked, holding up 2 cups. My friend shook his head immediately. Nah. She glanced at me. Wakas. I nodded. Yeah. She walked over and placed the mug on the table in front of me. Her fingers brushed the wood lightly as she set it down. Careful, she said. It's hot. My friend smirked faintly. Mom, he's not 5. Her eyes flicked toward him. I know, but then she looked back at me again, just for a second longer than necessary. And something about that made the room feel smaller. Later that evening, my friend left to grab food. Back in 20, he said, already halfway out the door. The house settled into quiet again. I stayed in the living room, staring at the TV without really watching it. From the kitchen, I could hear water running, dishes, cabinet doors opening and closing. Normal sounds. Still, something about the silence felt different tonight. After a moment, I stood and walked toward the kitchen. She was standing at the sink, sleeves pushed up again, rinsing a plate. "You don't have to do that now," I said. She glanced over her shoulder. "Oh." Then she turned the water off. "I didn't realize you were still here. I stopped. I didn't actually know what I was about to say. Waiting, watching. Both sounded strange." She dried her hands slowly on the dish towel. "You and him are always laughing when you study," she said. Tonight, it was quiet. "He left." "Yes," she nodded. "I noticed." The kitchen light hummed softly above us. I leaned against the counter again, the same spot as before. She stayed near the sink, twisting that silver ring on her finger. "You shouldn't stay too late," she said after a moment. "Why?" She hesitated, then gave a small shrug. "People notice things." My chest tightened slightly. "Like who?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked past me toward the counter, reaching for the kettle. Her arm brushed mine as she passed. It was nothing, just contact. Still, neither of us moved for a second. "You're my son's friend," she said quietly. The words weren't sharp, just careful. "I know, but sometimes," she continued softly, "it feels like you're not." I looked at her then, really looked. She seemed suddenly aware of how close we were standing. Her eyes flicked briefly to my mouth, then back up, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Just breathing, quiet. If I leaned forward even slightly, the thought stopped halfway. She stepped back first, just one small step, but it felt like a line being redrawn between us. Her voice came out softer than before. "You should probably go before he gets back." I nodded, but neither of us moved right away. After that afternoon, something shifted, not in a dramatic way. Nothing obvious, just small things. While I came over now, she noticed faster. Sometimes before I even knocked. The door would open and she'd already be standing there, like she'd heard my footsteps on the path. "Hi," she'd say. Simple, soft, and somehow that word stayed with me longer than it should have. A few days later, my friend and I were sitting in the living room pretending to study. He had headphones around his neck and was scrolling through his phone. "You've been coming here a lot lately," he said casually. I looked up from my notebook. "I always come here." "Yeah," he shrugged, but like earlier, I felt something tighten in my chest. "I like studying here." MHM. He didn't sound convinced. From the kitchen, I heard the quiet clink of a spoon against a mug. She was making tea again. A minute later, she appeared in the doorway. "Tea?" she asked, holding up 2 cups. My friend shook his head immediately. "Nah." She glanced at me. "Wakas?" I nodded. "Yeah." She walked over and placed a mug on the table in front of me. Her fingers brushed the wood lightly as she set it down. "Careful," she said. "It's hot." My friend smirked faintly. "Mom, he's not 5. Her eyes flicked toward him. "I know," but then she looked back at me again, just for a second longer than necessary. And something about that made the room feel smaller. Later that evening, my friend left to grab food. "Back in 20, he said, already halfway out the door. The house settled into quiet again. I stayed in the living room, staring at the TV without really watching it. From the kitchen, I could hear water running, dishes, cabinet doors opening and closing. Normal sounds. Still, something about the silence felt different tonight. After a moment, I stood and walked toward the kitchen. She was standing at the sink, sleeves pushed up again, rinsing a plate. "You don't have to do that now," I said. She glanced over her shoulder. "Oh." Then she turned the water off. "I didn't realize you were still here. I stopped. I didn't actually know what I was about to say. Waiting, watching. Both sounded strange." She dried her hands slowly on the dish towel. "You and him are always laughing when you study," she said. Tonight, it was quiet. "He left." "Yes," she nodded. "I noticed." The kitchen light hummed softly above us. I leaned against the counter again, the same spot as before. She stayed near the sink, twisting that silver ring on her finger. "You shouldn't stay too late," she said after a moment. "Why?" She hesitated, then gave a small shrug. "People notice things." My chest tightened slightly. "Like who?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked past me toward the counter, reaching for the kettle. Her arm brushed mine as she passed. It was nothing, just contact. Still, neither of us moved for a second. "You're my son's friend," she said quietly. The words weren't sharp, just careful. "I know, but sometimes," she continued softly, "it feels like you're not." I looked at her then, really looked. She seemed suddenly aware of how close we were standing. Her eyes flicked briefly to my mouth, then back up, and for a moment, neither of us spoke, just breathing, quiet. If I leaned forward even slightly, the thought stopped halfway. She stepped back first, just one small step, but it felt like a line being redrawn between us. Her voice came out softer than before. "You should probably go before he gets back." I nodded, but neither of us moved right away. After that night, I try not to come over as often. Not because anyone asked me to, just instinct. The house had started to feel different, like walking into a room where someone had already said something important and you'd arrived a second too late. For a few days, I stuck to campus, the library, late walks that didn't really have a destination. Still, habits are strange things. One evening, without really deciding to, I found myself walking down her street again. The lights were on inside the house. I almost kept walking, but before I could turn the corner, the front door opened. She stepped outside. For a second, we just stared at each other across the yard, both a little surprised. "Oh," she said softly. E. She wrapped her cardigan tighter around herself. The air had that early night chill, the kind that settles after sunset. "Were you coming over?" she asked. "I was just walking." She nodded slowly, like she believed me, but also didn't. Then she gestured toward the sidewalk. "Walk with me." We started down the block together, not touching, just close enough that I could hear the quiet rhythm of her breathing. Street lights hummed above us. Somewhere a dog barked behind a fence. Normal sounds, but the silence between us felt heavier tonight. "You haven't come by this week," she said eventually. "I've been busy." "That's new." "Ich glänzte her." "You noticed." She gave a small smile. "I noticed things." For a few steps we walked without talking. Then she stopped near a small park bench at the end of the street. "Sit for a minute." We sat down. The wood was cool through my hoodie. She leaned forward slightly, elbows on her knees, staring at the ground. "I've been thinking," she said quietly. That sentence alone made my chest tighten. "About what?" She exhaled slowly. "About how easy it is to forget certain boundaries." Her voice wasn't angry, just tired. I looked at the pavement. "You mean me?" "I mean both of us." Another pause. She rubbed her hands together like she was warming them. "You're young," she said. "You should be out with friends, dating girls your age, not sitting in kitchens with someone's mother." The word mother landed awkwardly between us. "I don't sit there because you're someone's mother," I said. She turned toward me then. "Then why?" The question hung there. I opened my mouth, closed it again, because the answer felt bigger than the moment. "You make it sound like I'm doing something wrong," I said quietly. She shook her head. "That's the problem." "What is?" Her eyes searched my face for a long second. "It doesn't feel wrong." The words barely came out above a whisper. Something shifted in the air between us, a kind of honesty that hadn't been there before. "I try not to look at you too long," she admitted softly. I felt my pulse in my throat. "Why?" She gave a short breath of a laugh. "Because when I do, I start thinking things I shouldn't." The streetlight above us flickered once. Neither of us moved. "You think I don't notice?" I said. Her brows knit slightly. "Notice what?" "The way you watch me when you think I'm not looking." Her lips parted just slightly. The silence stretched. Closer now, somehow, even though we hadn't moved. "If someone saw us right now," she murmured, "what do you think they'd say?" I looked at her. Really looked. "I don't know." Another pause. Then, quietly, "Do you want to stop coming over?" She didn't answer right away. Her gaze dropped briefly to my mouth, then back to my eyes. And in that moment, it felt like the entire night was waiting for her answer. She didn't answer my question that night. Not really. She just looked at me for a long moment on that park bench, the streetlight making her eyes look softer than usual. Then she stood up. "We should go back," she said quietly. No explanation, no conclusion, just that. And somehow that felt heavier than if she'd said, "Don't come over again." After that, things shifted again. The next time I came by the house, she didn't open the door. My friend did. You disappeared for a few days, he said as we headed inside. Yeah, busy. MHM. He tossed his bag onto the couch. Mom's been weird lately. I tried to sound casual. Weird how? He shrugged. Quiet. On her phone a lot. She's been going out more. I didn't ask anything else, but something inside me tightened slightly. A week passed, then another. I still came over sometimes, but the rhythm was gone. When I did see her, it was different. Shorter conversations. Polite smiles. The kind adults give when they're keeping something locked away. One evening, she was standing near the hallway mirror when I arrived, adjusting an earring. She looked dressed up, not in a dramatic way, just more careful than usual. Hi, she said when she saw me. My friend called from the living room. Mom, are you leaving? Just dinner, she replied. Then she grabbed her purse from the table. As she walked past me toward the door, there was a faint smell of perfume I didn't recognize. Not the light citrus one she usually wore. Something warmer, richer. She paused for a moment beside me, like she wanted to say something. But instead, she just gave a small nod and left. The door clicked shut behind her. From the couch, my friend looked up from his phone. She's meeting someone, I think. I tried to keep my expression neutral. Oh, yeah, he continued. Some guy from her work or something. They've been texting a lot. The words settled slowly in my chest, like a glass being placed carefully on a table. Not shattered, just there. That night, I walked home earlier than usual. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. For half a second, I thought it might be her. It wasn't. Just a group chat message I didn't bother opening. When I got back to my apartment, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the blank message screen for a long time. Her contact was still there. Aisha. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard. Are you okay? I erased it, then typed again. I haven't seen you much lately. Delete. Another try. Did I say something wrong that night? Delete. The cursor blinked patiently, like it had all the time in the world. After a while, I locked the phone and set it face down on the desk. Outside, a car passed slowly down the street. Inside, the room stayed quiet. I didn't feel heartbroken. Not exactly. I felt paused. Like life had started a sentence it wasn't sure how to finish. And for the first time in weeks, I realized something strange. The next evening when I walked past her street, I didn't stop. But when I glanced toward the house, the kitchen light was on, and the chair where I used to sit was empty. After that night in the kitchen, nothing changed overnight. There was no dramatic moment, no sudden decision where everything became clear. Just time. A few days passed before I came over again. This time I rang the bell instead of walking straight in like before. My friend opened the door. Finally, he said. Thought you forgot where I lived. Busy, I muttered. Yeah, sure. Inside, the house felt the same. Same hallway light. Same faint smell of detergent drifting from the laundry room. But when I stepped into the kitchen, she was already there. Making tea. She glanced up. Oh, E. The word sat between us for a second, quiet and familiar. She slid a mug across the counter toward me. No suga. I smiled faintly. You still remember. You always push the bowl away, she said. Some habits didn't disappear. Weeks passed like that. Small moments. Careful ones. Sometimes my friend was there, talking too loudly about football or complaining about classes. Sometimes he wasn't, and the kitchen would fall into those long, quiet stretches again. But the silence felt different now. Less fragile. One evening, I noticed something while we were sitting at the kitchen island. She wasn't twisting the silver ring anymore. I nodded toward her hand. You stopped wearing it. She looked down briefly. Oh. Then she shrugged. Guess I forgot. But the way she said it felt more like a decision than an accident. Spring crept in slowly after that. Longer evenings. Warmer air drifting through the open kitchen window. One night, we walked again, past the same streetlights, toward the same park bench. We sat there the way we had weeks before. Not much talking, just watching cars pass at the end of the road. You still come here a lot, she said after a while. Yeah. You could probably find somewhere more exciting. Probably. She smiled faintly. But you don't. I shook my head. No. A quiet breeze moved through the trees above us. After a minute, she spoke again. You know this will never be simple. I know. And people might talk. They usually do anyway. She laughed softly at that. Then her hand found mine on the bench between us. Not dramatic. Not hidden either. just resting there. Comfortable. Some things changed after that. I didn't come over every day anymore. Life had its own rhythm, classes, work, late nights studying. But when I did stop by, the kitchen light was usually on. Tea waiting. 2 mugs instead of 1. My friend still teased me about showing up early. She still pretended not to notice when I did. And sometimes, when the house went quiet and the clock ticked above the fridge, we'd sit there without saying much. The same way we always had. Only now it didn't feel like something unfinished. It felt steady, like a sentence life had finally decided to finish. A few months later, we passed that park bench again. She slowed slightly as we walked by. Funny, she said. What? That night? I thought everything might fall apart. I glanced at the bench. Yeah, she nodded. Then she looked at me with that same quiet smile. Turns out it was just the beginning. We kept walking, not rushing, just 2 people moving down a quiet street, the kitchen light waiting somewhere behind us. And somehow, that felt like enough.